Hello everyone, it is Dolphin Song, Lawrence and John. We are on chapter 26. We've come a long way and it's getting pretty exciting. Martine and Ben stayed where they were for as long as they could stand it, which was only about another 10 minutes because the stench of petrol and the claustrophobia brought on by the damn compartment drove them out. Fortunately, it was early evening and there was no one around. They hopped onto the sand and stood inhaling the clean, salty smell of the ocean, which was pure heaven after the hell of their journey. A long white beach tailed away, lit by the dim glow of the rising moon. The dhow was moored midway along it. In the distance was the outline of what looked to be a low, sprawling hotel or holiday apartments. Maybe it's one of those luxury lodges Lucy was going on about, Martine said hopefully. Her mind was already racing ahead to the moment when a kindly hotel manager would, after learning of their plight, offer them free accommodation for the night and allow them to phone home. She imagined herself wallowing neck deep in a bubble bath before tucking into a dinner of roast chicken, crispy potatoes, and loads of fresh vegetables smothered in gravy, followed by coffee and maybe a trifle. Afterwards, she'd fall into a feather-soft bed and sleep for 24 hours. Better not get too excited, cautioned Ben. They might not be pirates, but those men didn't exactly behave like hotel employees. They could just be using the island as a base for their operations and have nothing to do with the hotel, Martine said, determined not to let go of her vision. The hotel owner might be very interested to know that there are child kidnappers living on Paradise. They set off towards the buildings, the sand squeaking under their bare feet. The island was about half the size of Dugong, with gentle undulations rather than steep dunes, so they decided to follow the glittering Black Sea all the way round and approach the building from the back. That way they could be sure that the sinister men weren't in sight before showing themselves. For a hotel, there don't seem to be too many lights on, Ben commented as they appeared between the wind-twisted trunks of some pine trees some 30 minutes later. It is winter in Mozambique, Martine pointed out. Perhaps there are very few guests at this time of the year, or perhaps they're all at dinner. They waited a little while longer before venturing out into the open. It was only then, gazing up at the double-story block of rooms and the forbidding facade of the hotel itself, its vast curving terrace suspended over the ocean, they saw that that's all it was, a facade. A ruined shell. Not only was it unoccupied, it looked as if it had been that way for at least 30 years. The Civil War, something else, mismanagement perhaps, had driven away the tourists. Martine didn't know whether to cry or fly into a rage born of total despair. For 11 days she and the others had been trying to escape their island prison, only to end up here, the penal colony Alberta had told her about. She could still hear him saying, over the years, Santa Carolina has been a playground for wealthy tourists. They call it paradise, but oh, Miss Martine, if only they knew what that paradise had seen. Hundreds of hungry, suffering prisoners, tormented beyond what any man could endure, then taken to Death Island to be swallowed by the sea. Martine had recounted the story to Ben on the way over, but although he had been braced for the unexpected and hadn't allowed himself to be carried away with fantasies of featherbeds or roast chicken dinners, shock was written all over his face. Is this what grown-ups mean when they say, out of the frying pan and into the fire, Martine said. Ben recovered sufficiently to speak. We're still better off than we were, he said. If there are people here, even if they do turn out to be criminals, there must also be food and some way of contacting the outside world. But no matter what, we need to be off this island by sunrise. I'm pretty sure I could sail the dhow. We'll try to rescue Claudius, but if we can't, we'll have to leave him and go for help. We'll be no use to him, the dolphins, or anyone else if we get caught. Martine agreed wholeheartedly, particularly with the part about them leaving Paradise before sunrise. So they resumed their search of the hotel grounds with more urgency. The rooms they saw were all empty, their cracked walls and exposed electricity wires oddly clean, as if they were soon to be put back to use. Most eerie of all was the old ballroom, a sad shadow of its past glory. A weather-beaten, out-of-tune piano still stood in one corner, and Martine could almost hear the tinkle of keys and see the sequin-gowned dancers who must have glided across the floor beneath a brilliant chandelier. Out on the terrace, a gaping chunk of floor was missing, and the sea slurped and sucked at the crumbling foundations below. The next block of rooms was also disused, but close to the beach where they'd come in, they could see lights shining among the palms. The two areas were separated by a walkway which ran almost the width of the island. A flagless pole was in the center of it, and it was lined with weed-filled concrete flower beds in which roses or island flowers must once have bloomed. Martine and Ben were about to dart across the unkempt expanse when a lone guard appeared. He was swinging his truncheon and singing an African song in a low, sad voice. When the light fell on his face, it was young and handsome. He strolled the length of the walkway and disappeared through the palms onto the beach. "Now," said Ben, and they sprinted for a flat-roofed building in the center of the grounds. For the first time in 10 days, they were close to human habitation. The windows of the rooms glowed yellow, and there was washing hanging on the line. Smoke and the smell of cooking came from the rear. They followed the sound of voices to a side window, across which a cloth had been pinned in lieu of curtains. The window was slightly ajar, and the cloth hung crookedly, leaving a gap in one corner. Martine and Ben stood on tiptoe, so they could see the occupants of what must have once been a dining room or restaurant. 4 men were gathered around a wooden table laid with dishes of steaming food. A grainy television flickered in the background. 3 of the men were eating and watching the skipper, who was up out of his seat and seemed to be tormenting a 5th person by shoving a plate of prawns and rice at them, and then withdrawing it and eating a forkful himself. He stepped back, and Martine had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. Claudius was roped to a chair. "You're lying," the skipper was accusing him. "You are an island spy. Who sent you?" "Look, I would love to tell you I was a spy if it meant you'd give me some food," said Claudius, his eyes following the prawns longingly. "But I'm just an ordinary kid from Cape Town." "How many times do I have to tell you that?" The plate swept under his nose again, and Claudius's eyes closed momentarily with the effort of resisting it. He swallowed. Out in the cold night, Martine swallowed in sympathy. "Was it Nico from Benguera?" demanded the skipper. "He's always trying to keep people from the mainland from coming in and making money from the islands. Those island grandfathers do not understand business. Their heads are in the past. We have a boy working for us, Fernando from Bazaruto Island. He's just 18, but he understands that a person must take opportunities when they come and stop worrying so much about preserving animals and plants. He's a young man with ambition. He has some things to learn about the world, but he..." Behind him, Carlos let out a strangled squawk. He sprang out of his chair, gave the television 2 hard thumps, and turned up the volume. Distorted sound blared into the room. The picture cleared slightly, and the words "Sea Kestrel Mystery, 11th Day" appeared beneath a photo of Claudius. He was younger, plump, and paler, and he was wearing his old joker smile, but it was unmistakably him. Ah, was the skipper's incredulous response, as he looked from the TV to Claudius and back again. The other men reacted the same way. "Good evening," intoned the newsreader. 11 nights ago, 7 Cape Town school children fell overboard during a freak storm off the Mozambique coast and have been missing, presumed drowned, ever since. Presumed drowned, that is, by almost everyone except property magnate Ed Rapier, father of Claudius. Martine watched. Claudius turned white. The search has been concentrated on the southern coastline around Inhambana, where marine experts say currents would have carried the children in the unlikely event they survived the sharks and freezing water temperatures. And Mr. Rapier has personally sponsored one of the largest air and sea rescues ever undertaken in these waters. Despite that, not a trace of the 7 has been found. Yet Mr. Rapier, one of South Africa's most successful businessmen, has refused to accept defeat. A broad-shouldered man with a grey-streaked lion's mane of hair appeared on the screen. He was standing beside a rescue helicopter on a windy beach. "I don't believe my boy is dead," he told the camera. "I will never believe it until I see his body. He's too full of life, too smart, and too used to having his own way. He's a survivor. If I have to sift every grain of sand on every beach in Mozambique, I'll find him. I'll never give up, and I'm sure my feelings are shared by the families of the other missing children. On their behalf, I'm prepared to offer R1 million for information leading to the safe return of my son and any of his classmates." A contact number appeared on the bottom of the screen. "Liar!" roared the skipper, and he struck Claudius across the face. A palm print appeared on the boy's cheek. "You think you can talk rubbish to us and get away with it? Who else is on Dugong Island? If your friends cause trouble with a test tomorrow, I will feed you to the sharks." Claudius lifted his chin a fraction. There was a wobble in his voice, and his fingers gripped the arm of the chair very tightly. But there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there for days, and he said determinedly, I was alone on the island, completely alone. I think I must have been the only survivor. I remember getting into an empty lifeboat, but everything after that is a blur. When I woke up, I was on Dugong Island. Of course, I didn't know it was called Dugong. This latest untruth caused the skipper to lose his temper. He slammed down the plate and lifted his arm as if to strike Claudius. A babble of furious African voices shattered the evening quiet. The dialect they spoke was not dissimilar to Zulu, so Ben translated in a low voice. They're very angry with him, he reported. They say he's not thinking clearly. What is he doing hitting a tourist? Here they have a chance to earn R1 million in reward money for handing over a boy who's very annoying and only going to cause trouble for them, and he's more worried about being loyal to their boss. They say he has been blinded by their boss's power. Can't he see that they're being cheated over the money from the tests? Why else does he think their boss drives a Mercedes when their own cars and bicycles are held together with string? The skipper seemed startled by this mutiny. He made a few feeble objections, but quickly came to the conclusion they were right. They were being cheated. What possible harm could it do if they returned the boy and claimed the reward money for themselves? Was it not their due after all the months they've spent caretaking Dugong Island and being bored half to death on Paradise Island? And nobody but the four of them need know anything about it. He smiled his gap-toothed smile. The other three smiled back. Then he untied Claudius, made a big fuss of dusting him down, straightening his clothes, and shouted to some unseen person to bring him a Coke and a hot plate of prawns and rice. My friend, forgive us the small misunderstanding, he said in English. We are paranoid because of some problems with the islanders. Eat now and be happy. Tomorrow we will take you home to your father. Right, chapter 27. But Martine and Ben and what's going to happen?